Welcome to the Deconstructed Woman podcast, a podcast about breaking down barriers between women, exploring and sharing perspectives of each individual woman's experience, and discovering what we have in common and what makes us different. Hosted by Elisa Marie and Joji.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of The Deconstructed Woman with Elisa Marie and Joji. We're here today, and we are going to, I'm starting to laugh just thinking about how hard it's been for us to come up with a funny story kind of episode. So Alyssa and I were talking about the fact that we've had so many serious topics that we wanted to do something a little bit lighthearted and maybe even find our funny bone. And I think what Alyssa and I discovered is that our funny bone is really hidden deep within our bodies. And we've had a really hard time coming up with what we would consider funny stories. So I think it's safe to say that Alyssa and I are in the same lane, and we're pretty intellectual and not as humorous as we thought we might be. And so I'm going to bring Alyssa into this because she's got a story to share with us that's going to open up the funny conversations. So bear with us as we muddle through this.
Yeah, it's funny in that it took us, I mean, what has this been, like a couple of weeks of us trying to find a topic that would work to be more lighthearted, because I think that when we started this podcast, we had so many topics that resonated with us that we wanted to touch on. We wanted to have these deeper conversations. And really, that's the nature of this podcast. We're called the Deconstructed Woman for a reason. And that reason is that we like to deconstruct things, to take them apart, talk about them, shine light on them, have these kind of deeper conversations. But also we wanted to rein it back in to also recognize that, you know, maybe once in a while to change it up and have more of a funny conversation. And so I desperately tried to find what I could talk about. I asked my husband. We actually had a couple of situations over the last week that we were just like rolling in laughter, but they were not appropriate for the podcast. So we're not going to delve into those. But one that did come up, we had friends over last night, and they were telling me a story about one of their friends in a situation. And as they were telling the story, they were just laughing their heads off. And I was like, okay, that's what I need. That's the kind of story I need. So the one that came up for me was the fact that I'm very stubborn. And Jason had given my husband, Jason, I think it was a birthday present for us to go sailing in Chicago. And so we were very excited to go. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to go sailing. How fun. So we walked to the port where the boats are on Lake Michigan, and I couldn't find where the place was that we were going to go sailing. And so I was like, okay, I think it's over here. I think we go this way and we'll get to it. And he's like, yeah, I know. I think it's definitely this way, because I think that ends, like that cove. It's just it ends and it drops right into the lake. And so you have to go the other way. And I said, no, I'm convinced that it is this way. Do not doubt me. And this was, of course, before we were married. We were dating. And the fact that this man stayed with me until now shows his love for me, because we walked all the way that I said. He was like, okay, we'll go your way. And it was the end of a cove and dropped right into the lake. And so then we had to backtrack all the way back around the whole area to go to the other side, which is where the actual dock was. So that was just like a good example. It made me laugh so hard recollecting this, because sometimes we have these moments where we're just so convinced that something is what we think it is, and we will go to the grave. I know this to be true. And then when you find out that you were wrong, you either have to laugh it off or just be like completely mortified. So we laughed it off, and we made it to the sailboat, albeit late, but we made it and we had a great time. But that was the first story that came to mind. I think, Georgia, you had said that you had some examples also of you like being stubborn and trying to muddle through that in some ways. Is that what you were saying before?
Yeah, when I was thinking about stories, I have a couple in mind, but relating to, if we're going to stick with husbands, I thought we might just do subject by subject maybe. But when I know that I laugh about it now, that Dan and I are not very good vacationers together. We're very different in the way we want to vacation. He takes everything in life very lightly in terms of he likes to have a good time and he doesn't overthink anything in certain ways. Like his job, to him, a job is 9 to 5. And so when we would take a vacation, he wanted to go do stuff, see stuff. I am very, I don't know, overachiever at work. I'm very intense at work. And so when I want to go on vacation, I want to totally disconnect from the world. I don't want to have a schedule. I don't want to plan anything. Last thing I want to do is go to a museum or anything like that. And that's what Dan lives for. Dan loves museums, learning, history. He just loves all of that. So when we first got together, it was really hard to plan a vacation because I want to chill out and he wants to ramp it up. And so it has literally taken us 2 decades to get this together. And now what we have come up to is like a happy balance of like we do an activity filled day one day and then we take a down day the next day. Or what we'll do is we'll do something really active in the morning and then we'll take a nap and then ease into dinner. And so it has taken us so long to find a comfortable rhythm when we vacation because we are so different in the way that we do it. And in the beginning, and I can make light of it now, and it seems like, oh yeah, we're really happy now. We found this happy medium. But in the beginning, I would say the first 5 years, it was really stressful and very difficult. And neither one of us liked to even talk about vacations because it was going to end up in some sort of a disagreement about what we're going to do. And we were both probably going to be angry with the other person to some level. And now I look back at it and I think to myself, we're two smart people. Like, why didn't we get to this compromise like 15 years ago? Like, why did it take us so long to get to a place where both of us can meet halfway and split that time? And I have no answer for that. All I know is that it took us this long and now we're very comfortable with that. But boy, did it seem like a long road to get to where we are today. So just thinking about those times when we had to go back and forth actually makes me a little stressed out just thinking about it. Silliness totally now. But at the time, it was just, nope, if I go on vacation, I want to chill out. I want to relax. Like, I don't want to be dragged from place to place looking at this and that I don't really care about. And to some extent, I still feel that way now, but I can tolerate it a lot better now than I could 15, 20 years ago. So that's my input of looking back and saying, you know what, you have to let it go, let things pass because it's not the end of the world. How about you, Alyssa? You have any other funny stories you want to add to this topic?
Again, we were trying to think back in the past and just like funny experiences. And I think that what you're touching on is just like that merging of relationships. Like when you get into a relationship and just merging like your expectations with this other person's expectations. Like Jason loves to do detours. He loves to get on the road and then detour to someplace. And I am very much, I would need to get to where I'm going as quickly as possible. There's no detours. Like you get in, you get out, rest stop wise, and then you go and you get there as early as possible. Like that's like the end destination is my goal. And he's like, let's stop here. That looks cool. Let's do this. And so it's just one of those things where you're merging these expectations. And I think that leads to a lot of, again, like you said, funny now, but in the moment, super frustrating circumstances. But that's what I thought of when you were talking about you and Dan and the vacationing and that sort of thing. So I think that there's quite a bit there. I'm sure people can relate to that and probably can share their own funny stories of things that, again, maybe merging in relationships or just early on experiences. I think that we probably could pull a couple more, but we'll jump into kind of other things that we thought were funny or that have made us laugh over the years. I didn't get into too much thinking about my kiddos, but I have tons of stories of them and their quirkiness. And I think I like give my coworkers a full report of like the past week, like stuff that happened in my house. And I'm like, I should probably just start writing this stuff down because you can't make this stuff up. It just is hilarious with kids. But I think you had a particular situation that you thought of with your daughter.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I'm sure that if my daughter was to talk about it, she would not think it's funny at all. But I think that as soon as I knew I was having a daughter, I started to like intentionally look at how am I going to empower this child to be like the woman who was always going to know her mind and speak up and do all this kind of stuff. So even in utero, I think I was coaching her like, you know what, you're not going to be like me. I'm going to give you permission and advocate for you to talk. You say what you need to say, keep your power, don't give your power away. So since she was a toddler, I've been talking to her about all these different things. And, you know, for most of the time, she looked at me very confused. Just, I don't know what's going on here. I have constantly, and she will say this when she talks about it, you know, with to us today or with her friends or whatever, she'll say, yeah, my mom has been giving me the sex talk since I was like 6. And it's true. I've been talking to her a lot about her body and cherishing her body and private space and all these different kinds of things. And it wasn't until when she went to college that she said, you know, Mom, the last 20 years of you talking to me about what I need to know about sexuality and things like that has finally come to fruition. Like now that I'm in college, I realized like what this story was coming up to. She said, because I've realized that like most of my friends have never talked to their parents openly about relationships and sexuality and things like that. And she said, you know, she said, maybe you started a little too early. She said, but I'm better for having those conversations because now I'm educating my college friends about some of the stuff that you've been talking to me about. And I thought to myself, wow, I can't believe, not that their families didn't talk to them, but that I have been talking about it for so long. And like you, they tell you in parenting, like you have to, like your kids don't, even if they ask you questions, they don't want to know all the details. Like you have to really make it to child ear so that they can understand it. And for the first time, I thought to myself, boy, you know what? I probably did a bit of overkill on this whole topic to the point where, I mean, I know that's who I was just because I was so ready to make sure that I raised a completely empowered person that knew their own power and knew their own rights and everything. But I think I can step back and say, maybe I started way too early and was way too much for way too long. And Alyssa, don't make that mistake. You're probably smarter than I am with that. But I have to say that it had a lot to do with my family of origin. And I think feeling like a second class citizen because I was a girl and I didn't want to have a daughter who felt the same way. And so definitely went overboard. But now I can think back and say, okay, if I have a granddaughter, I probably use Neela as a guinea pig and probably will temper that desire a lot just because of what I've lived through and survived and to see how she's made it through with the emphasis I put on this. So very interesting to me, but feel a little embarrassed that I was a little gung-ho about all of that. For sure.
I was going to say, I think I did the same, but in a different vein, because I was really strong about like stranger danger to my kids. They're very small right now. I think I went a little overboard with that because I was like thinking about it now, and this was probably within the last couple of years. I was just like, don't talk to anybody and don't take candy and don't go in a car or you'll die. I was just like very dramatic about it because I just obviously didn't know how to actually talk about it in like any semblance of like at the child's level. I was just like, you can't do this. And so my kids now repeat this to their friends and I get wind of it and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. The parents are looking at me like, what is your child saying? Like, how did they get that? And I'm like, yeah, that was me. Because I think that, you know, so many things have happened in, I don't even know, like the last 10, 15, probably longer than that, like 20 years or something. But like just the idea of like kids being kidnapped or taken off their front yard and like that just terrifies me. And so I was just like, don't kick, scream, do whatever you need to do. So my poor children, like I know that I sent, so I can see the park from my house. And I think this was probably beginning of the summer. I sent Vivian. Her friends had gone ahead of her. And so I said, I'm getting like your brother and sister ready. So go ahead, start walking, and I'll be right behind you. And so she made it like maybe a block away from our house. And I could see her and this little boy who's probably no more than, I don't know. So she's 8. So he was maybe 10 or 12. He was riding his bike and he pulled up back next to her and just like started talking to her. And I can see her talking to him, looking back. I'm trying to get her siblings situated in the stroller and ready to go. And then she comes running back to me in just tears. And I was like, what happened? And she's like, he scared me because he was asking me where are my parents, and he was asking me these questions, and I just didn't know why he was asking me. So I just ran home because I felt like I was in danger. He was probably just asking you because you guys were all going to the park, but like that's how much I've ingrained it in them, that like they are 100% will turn around and come back home. I can't be upset about it because I was like, good job for listening to your spidey senses. But also, now we all have to go to the park together because nobody can go ahead because of how much I've ingrained that. So I think, again, different message, but definitely sometimes we do emphasize it so heavily that it scares the heck out of them.
That's for sure. That's for sure. The other thing that we touched upon was, as we were trying to dig for these funny stories, was just like how things, how we, what is funny to us is maybe not funny to somebody else. And so in my family, historically, we've poked fun at each other. So like my dad was very known to make fun of my mom, and my mom didn't make fun of anybody. She was pretty serious. And then my brothers and I, we make fun of each other. And I think we almost had a competition as to who could like degrade the other person the best. Like it, and even when we get together with our families, we're always talking about stories about when we would just poke fun at each other, or we embarrass each other or whatever. And Dan is, like I've said, he's a little bit more on the serious side, and he is definitely more intellectual than I am. And so his jokes are actually very, very smart. He's got smart humor, which I mean, I don't even think I know what that is exactly, but him and his family make a lot of dry jokes that are very intellectual. So in order to understand what the joke is, you have to be able to understand the reference, and the reference can be historical, it can be technical, it can be geographical, it can be all these different things. And because my family is like such simple, stupid humor, because we're making fun of each other, like I rarely get their jokes. And it feels really, I feel really dumb in this family. And it's something that my daughter-in-law and I have commiserated about, because we're both from, her mom is from Guam, her dad is from Italy, and my family is an immigrant family too. And so I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just an immigrant experience where we're not as intellectual, but I very rarely do I catch a joke that Dan and his boys or Dan and his family talks about, because we have dumb humor. We don't have smart humor. And that's something that I've realized that I can't keep up with Dan. And if I poke fun at him, it's usually not anything he thinks is funny at all. And so it is something that's taking a little bit of time to get used to, because I can't keep up with them. Do you have any of those kinds of differences in your family when it comes to humor, whether it's Jason's family or your family, or just how your parents, make jokes versus your generation, Alyssa?
I think that I don't really know like how to categorize my humor. When I see something and I think it's funny, I just kind of like different shows that are funny to me are like realistic. All this stuff is happening and people are just trying to muddle through, but I don't like there's like a lot of, I'm trying to think of like different genres, so it's like probably not good for me to try to explain it, but the bottom line is I don't really know what humor I have, because I was saying, I think earlier to you, like, I think I can only think of like a handful of times that I've like really belly laughed. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not a funny person and I don't have a sense of humor. So I think I have two strikes against me. So I was telling you how I had just grabbed this book from the library today that was like how to keep your marriage happy, healthy, and thriving by following the rules of comedy. Because I was like, maybe I need more laughter and more like lightheartedness in my life, because I really genuinely, I don't find things funny. And like, poor my husband, like he thinks things are hilarious, or he like is cracking up about stuff. And I'm like, what, did you say something funny? I didn't hear anything funny. Like, what are you laughing about? And he's like, that is so funny. And I'm like, nope, like not funny to me. I don't get it. And I just walk away, because I like, we definitely don't have the same kind of humor, though I couldn't categorize his either. Because I don't even know. We probably should have researched that, because I'm like, I don't know what the different kinds of humor are, but I like you said at the beginning, I think my funny bone is like either really hidden or non-existent. And I don't know if that's something that you can develop. I assume that it is, but I really don't know. Like, there's not a lot of things that make me laugh. And I'm like, does that mean that I'm like, that's not how I connect with people? And I think that it's just maybe a side effect of the work that I do, or, I'm just very serious. I'm very serious. I'm very like highly organized, very to the point. I like to do things in an orderly fashion, and like comedy and things seems like outside that realm. So it's just a interesting thing. So I hope there's people out there that can relate to me or you on this, and maybe they can help me because I'm like, gosh, I know that my kids make me laugh all the time, but that's because they're doing things that are just absurd. And you're like, oh, okay. Again, you either have to laugh or you're going to cry. So I usually try to laugh it off because it seems like a better option than to just like melt down in front of them. But I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation. So we might have to come back to it, because at some point, like, I'm going to have to figure out like what really gets me. I don't know if it's like gets me to laugh or just like where my humor lies. Like, I make people laugh in conversations all the time, but I'm not trying to. And I think that's probably worse, because I'm not trying to necessarily be funny. I'm just like recollecting, like I said, funny stories about my kids, but like they are just like cracking up. And I remember like my best friend in elementary school, like she was like, "You are hilarious." And she used to laugh all the time. And I was like, I have no idea why this girl is always laughing, but I guess like it worked. Like, we were best friends through elementary and middle school, and still are, friends to this day. But it's one of those things where it's like, I have no idea what makes me funny, but I know that I am, because I know that I can make like a group of people laugh about something, but it's not a conscious effort.
Yeah, I was thinking, as you were talking, like, oh, when have I tried to be funny? And I will say that I've used humor as a tool to convey like a message in a very non-confrontive way. So one thing I know that I've done is I try to make a joke of something by like to communicate a certain message. Like, I remember, I was raised very conservatively, and I was taught to have a very specific boundary about my personal space. Obviously I'm not that way today, but when I was younger, especially if there was somebody of the opposite sex that was really close proximity to me, that was something that made me uncomfortable, because there were rules of propriety, the way that I was raised and such like that. And so I remember my very first job after I got married. I had moved to Chicago. My family's far away. And I remember I was at like the first couple months of my job as a therapist in my first job in Buffalo Grove. And one of the new hires that was hired with me, like I was I was bending over, like signing something for our secretary. And then he came and he like used my back as like a table. And so he put his elbows on my back as I'm bent over, and he's like writing on my back. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? Like, this person doesn't know me. Why is he doing this to me? Why is he like in my space? And so like, I like threw him off my body just because I got up, and he was a little shocked, because I was like so violent about it. And then I could tell that he was surprised and that he was meaning it to be fun and, like casual. And here I was like, what is going on? And so I just made this joke like, oh, in my culture, you and I would be engaged at this point. Like, what are you doing? And he registered, and then he started laughing, and I started laughing. But that was like my way of saying, like, you totally invaded my personal space. Like, I'm not raised this way. Like, you need to step back. And he, I think, kept his distance from me after that. But that is something that I know that I've done, is sort of like needed to find a way to communicate something in a way that was maybe able to be heard. And I would fashion a joke out of it somehow. But that's the closest I can come to like humor. But that was very intentional humor and trying to, say something without saying anything. But so I do think that is a strategy I've used to deliver messages. I don't think it's really a funny bone kind of a thing, but definitely a communication style, I think, when I'm trying to get through maybe a difficult situation or trying to navigate something that I'm not sure how I'm feeling my way through. That's the best way I can describe that. So, but like you said, I mean, we are not the two of the funniest people on this planet. So we'll have to continue talking about it and thinking about it, and maybe shore up some stories for another episode that focuses more on humor, where we maybe, have done some more, even though we have spent a couple months trying to shore up some stories. So this is a poor representation of what we've come up with, but I think it's a good idea. And I think that if nothing else, it teaches us to take life a little bit less seriously and, find our funny bone and exercise that muscle. I think that's what I'm learning from this podcast today. Alyssa, what about you?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that's what I think we did a lot of, like, soul searching on, like, inadvertently in realizing this. And it's cracking me up in that, like, again, I think that I don't know. So this is going to be like one of those podcasts where we're going to really open it up and say, like, hey, everybody, what did you think? Like, maybe people can come up with more lighthearted topics for us and help us out here in that regard. But also, like, maybe the people that are pulled to our podcast are also intellectuals who are, like, to dive into these deeper conversations. So you're probably maybe sitting there like, oh yeah, I totally get this, because sometimes that those two don't mix. Sometimes they do. There's a lot of comedians out there that have a very smart way that they provide humor and comedy. And so I think that there's more of us out there, but I think that there's also I would definitely agree with what you said, like, take things, you can be focused on, getting things done and being highly organized or intellectual or having these deeper conversations, but also make room and have space for laughter and humor and play, which I know that we talked about in a podcast before. Like, that's something that's really foreign to me, but I'm trying to embrace it because I think that there's so much that has happened in our world, and we really do need to have a little bit of laughter and humor in our lives to get us through, because like I said before, you either laugh or you cry. So, I think that this has been a journey, and it's going to be continuation as we progress through, and hopefully we'll get some ideas for more lighthearted episodes and kind of integrate those in here, because I love getting the feedback like, oh, I listened to your podcast on my way to work or while I'm going for a walk. And I think that these are thought-provoking episodes and ideas, but we also want to provide you with real life situations and not just focus on like the deep, dark stuff. We want to also provide you with like some semblance of reality, and it's not all about that. It's really we're going to try to find a good balance. So to be continued, but I have loved this conversation, Joji. It made me laugh, even if it wasn't out loud, because I think we can relate to each other, and I love that we're both struggling together. So thank you for that, and I'll let you kind of close us out.
Sure. The one thing I thought about is that I'm going to keep a little diary of my funny stories from this point on, because I do think that there are times that I laugh, but it's hard to recall them when you're trying to like pull them out of the air. And so I think I'm going to have to keep like a little funny journal or something like that, because I bet you we have things that do happen that are funny to us. And then we just, we just take it in stride and move forward. But I'm really going to challenge myself because, humor is probably one of the secrets to staying young. And I will definitely say, after spending the weekend with my grandson, that when I look at life through a 4-year-old's eyes, I have so much more fun than I do with my 55-year-old eyes. And so I do think that adopting a child's mind is definitely something that can really re-engage us with everyday experience and wonder. And so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to hopefully take notes on that. So thank you, everybody, for being on this fun little journey with us today on our journey and path to finding humor in our lives. And we really wanted to take a rest from some heavy conversations, but we do love to talk about deep stuff. And so you let us know what you want to talk about. You can give us an email at thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com, or you can leave us a message, voicemail at the podcasters through this platform. And there's lots of ways to get a hold of us, and you can find us all over the place. And if nothing else, please reach out to us individually or on the Facebook page, which a lot of you have done, which we've really appreciated, to show support and give us encouragement to continue doing this kind of work. So with that, I'm signing off on behalf of Alyssa Marie and Joji. Thank you so much. And until next time, have a great rest of your day, your week, and we'll talk again soon. Bye. Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Deconstructed Woman. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, rate this episode, or subscribe to be notified of all new content. We want to hear from you, our listener. Do you have thoughts on the discussions we're having? Want to share topic suggestions? Or want to join us for a topic that you're passionate about? Contact us at our email address, thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com.